from what I understand, these aren't magic.
No.
Oh, yeah.
And
Move it closer to my face. Probably help.
no, we're not doing any ASMR tonight. Alrighty, folks, let's begin.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah,
Let's
as
do
the
that.
sign kind of points out, we're Aksys Games.
Yay.
Thanks for showing up. Just kind of a heads up for everyone, this will be a little bit more, I can't speak any language today. This will be different from our normal panels, and that will be talking mostly about us and how we do things. So we're gonna be peeling the curtain back, as it were, on like some of our processes, like how we get games, how we edit stuff. So things of that nature. So if you wanna like see how the cake is made, as it were.
Oh
this
my
is the
God,
panel
we're
for
just
you.
mixing metaphors like there's no tomorrow, I guess, huh?
Yes, you can lead a horse to water, but you
3
can't.
in a row.
Yes. Well, you can lead a horse to water. You can't make them make silk purses.
Wow.
That's how it works, right?
Don't get him started.
Yeah, we'll stop now. But anyway, before we kick off, we should introduce ourselves, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. Oh, who we are. Oh.
Oh.
We've got slides.
Cool.
This one's me. I'm that one. I am relatively new to the Aksys team compared to my two friends over here. I've only been there for about 9 months now. I'm one of the marketing managers. The games that I've worked on most recently are like Little Dragons Cafe and Deathmark, and I'm one of the regular streamers on our Twitch channel, which we're streaming there Tuesdays and Thursdays, 3:30 to 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. So if you wanted to watch that, it's really fun, I promise. I also made this PowerPoint. That one's Karen.
That's clearly me, although I am not blonde, so I lied apparently in my photo. I've been at Aksys Games for almost 10 years now, and I moved up through the ranks. I started as a QA tester and then became a proofreader and then assistant editor, and now I am an actual straight-up editor. And it's a little bit, the responsibility level kind of went like up in the air. Like QA testers, yes, typo. Proofreader, typo. Assistant editor, fix this. Editor, you are in charge of everything. Don't mess up.
No pressure.
So, yes, I'm most known for my work on the Zeroscape series, and thank you. And Deathmark, Tokyo Twilight, Ghost Hunters. Man, go through everything. I've touched probably almost everything in some form or another in the past 10 years. So all the Otomes, yay, Otome fans. I'm the one that does all the research on those games so that we make sure we get good Otomes instead of ones that you're like, what is the plot of this? I don't understand. So I go and make sure that those actually have good stories.
Cool.
That's me.
Yeah. All right, are we ready to talk about Mike?
Do we have to?
Well, you're up here.
He didn't let me take his picture,
Fair
so I
enough.
took his picture.
Yes, that's me. I'm Mike Engler. I've been at Aksys for about
About the same as me.
same time, 10 years. I started out as an editor. I worked on Blaze Blue, Tokyo Xanadu, Muramasa. Can't remember.
A lot of fighting stuff.
A lot of the fighting games. Sorcery Saga Curse of the Great Curry God, which is one of my all-time favorites because it's just a massive pun fest. Right now, I am one of the marketing and community managers as well. I was the voice of insanity and chaos on Twitter for a while. Now I just kind of lurk behind the scenes as disembodied voice Mike. And that's about it.
Oh yeah, I guess both of you are kind of disembodied voices on the stream.
Yes.
Yes.
Increasingly popular characters.
Just need little emojis or something.
Yeah, we just try not to wear out our welcomes. It's hard sometimes.
Oh, I guess, this is basically the panel, so.
Yay, panel time. Yay.
All right. So, as you can see, as some of you may know, we're Aksys Games. Our full name is Aksys Games Localization, Incorporated. We were founded in 2006 by Akibo Shie, who you can see in this photo right here. He's smiling. That's what he looks like all the time,
All the time.
every single second of every single day. And we live in Torrance, in California.
Which is south of Los Angeles by about 20 minutes.
Yeah,
20
20
minutes or ish.
Tell that to my
Los Angeles.
commute.
And we are kind of in the triangle of Japanese publishers because we have a lot nearby us, like Aksys next to us, Idea Factory's next to us, whole passel of them.
Yeah.
A few other things that people may not know about Aksys Games is that it did start out as a localization company. Like prior to publishing things, they did work on other games. Our CEO started out at Atlas as the head of production and localization, and then one day woke up and went, wow, I can just do this all for myself and keep all the money, which is a good way to start it. So one of the games, and how I first learned of Aksys Games localization, I used the full name for a reason, was on Wild Arms 5. Like, that was probably the first game I worked on in the games industry.
Man,
when my
that takes me
entry-
back. Wow.
PS2 era. Yeah, I'm old. I'm
Wild
like,
Arms.
yeah, like cut me open, count the rings old.
Wow.
But from there, our CEO Akibo started like transitioning into like publishing games. I think the very first game was Eagle Eye Golf, which
Yay,
was a fun
we
little.
started big. Woo.
No, the thing is, from such humble beginnings, a mighty empire has come forth. Hopefully, without dragons taking us out in the final 6 minutes of a 10-year run.
We have little dragons.
Okay, little dragons. So just kind of pointing out, because there's a lot of people, like early on, there was a how to get into the industry panel. And one of the ways to do it is,
Make your own company.
yeah, start your own company.
That would do it, yeah.
Like, just kind of keep,
Start small. Make
Yes.
your own company.
yeah, start small, just kind of stay focused, and then as the opportunities arise, just take them. Don't drop the ball. Don't drag your feet, because that's kind of how we were built. And in a fairly short time, Aksys became a straight publisher. I think it was like within 3 years. They were it was all our games and stopped working on other titles for other people.
How many people worked at the beginning?
At the beginning, when let's see, 1, 2, 3, I think it was 4 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And we only have about 15 now. So if you
About
think
20.
about all the work that gets put into localizing games, it's only 15 people.
And they're all doing different things.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that later on in the program. So,
oh, I guess it's that time, everybody. Time
Later
to find
on.
out what
It's
localization
later.
is.
Woo.
yeah, later on. meaning
I'm
30
excited. I've
seconds.
waited 9 months for this, so finally someone will tell me. Step 1 is, of course, we have to get the games. Mike, what does that mean?
Yeah, I want to say we go out, get games. But it's not really that simple. There are several different ways we get games at Aksys. One is that other companies approach us because we've built enough of a reputation that some companies will be like, oh, for this style of game, this genre, these are the people we want.
Yeah.
We want as a
And
partner.
And like Tokyo Game Show and what's the game convention that's here? I forgot what the name of it is.
GDC.
Yes. I was
Yeah.
like game developers conference. Hi, that would just make sense. Yes.
Yes, yeah, because that's the second place we normally get things is going to conventions and going to exhibitions and just seeing what's out there. And there's also us doing what you guys do is crack open an episode or issue of Famitsu and see what games interest us. Because a lot of times, once we see games or are approached, we will then, in the office, sit down and discuss it. So for the most part, there has to be a majority of people in the office that go, we want to do this. We like this game. We think it will work. And if there isn't that consensus, then it becomes more of kind of a business decision. But I would say 95% of the time, if there isn't consensus within the office that we like the game, we will not do it. So that probably explains a few choices that's happened over the years.
It's a challenge though to decide which games you want to do because you can't sit down and play the entire game. You have to go off of your impressions at the beginning, usually go a half hour to an hour into a game, depending on how much text there is or how much fighting or the type of game specifically. Or if the game crashes on us, then we don't get that far into the game.
Yeah,
But
sometimes we're looking at betas, so that happens more often than you'd think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very much like, okay, do I like these characters? Do I like the action? Do I like the style? Do I like that it's a strategy game? Does it work for this type of game? And you have to put all that together and then figure out, oh, this would be good in the United States. Or it could just be so crazy that you're like, okay, I kind of just want it because it's really crazy.
AKA the Zero Escape series. That's kind of
Yes.
how we fell into that.
Yes, Zero Escape series, the 999, the first one, it was Flash game on browser. That's the only thing that we had to work off of, and it was in Japanese, and it was a demo. And if you've played Zero Escape and you think about the first puzzle room, which was very much, you have to find all of these little pieces, but it's in Japanese, so it's like, okay, can I find everything that I need? Can I read the hints? No, I cannot read the hints. And the Flash demo actually had, we had to change one of the puzzles on the cards to a visual puzzle instead, because I think it was characters in the Japanese kanji, and it was like the order that they line up is like you have to arrange it, and all of us are going, I don't know what this. Somebody solve this puzzle for me. I don't understand. What? And our translator's like, yes, this is like A, B, C, but it's in this order, and it has to be like this. Oh, okay. Just click on the right thing for me, please, so I can advance through this Flash game. So
Yeah, because that's another interesting thing with getting games, that makes it difficult and kind of almost like part art, part black magic, is that a lot of times the only thing we'll get from a game is what you would see on the screen if it wasn't for that, was just a PowerPoint presentation and a concept, like essentially a concept doc of this is the type of gameplay we're thinking of. Here's the general story. It's not fleshed out. Here is some art that may or may not resemble what we're actually putting into the game. Now, can you give us oodles and oodles of money to make it? Thanks, guys. So,
like, do you like our concept idea? I do, but I would like to see some gameplay, please.
yeah, but there's sometimes where it's
too early.
too early into the build, or it's like they haven't even kicked off production yet. So it's a matter, like with Little Dragons Cafe, it was, when we decided to move forward with it, it was mainly because of Yasuhiro Wada. He makes good games, so you know whatever he's going to make in the future is going to be good. And like the art style and just kind of the direction they were going. It's like, we have faith in this. This seems like a good idea, and we were right. But yeah, for us choosing games, it isn't as simple as some people might think. It's like, oh, that's a good game, bring it over. There's a lot to it, and there's also games that we really like, before we move on, that we cannot get because the publishers or the developers in Japan, for some reason, don't want to localize it. Because that happens much more often than you think.
They just wanted Japan only.
Yes.
And a lot of things just have licenses that are only Japan also, so that.
Oh, dear
causes
Cthulhu,
problems.
yes.
So, or other companies in the U.S. steal the games before we do, so that's also a thing. Danganronpa.
Yeah. So now we're at,
We are at step 2, which is organizing the text. Karen, what on earth could that possibly mean?
Oh, I have no idea. What does that mean?
because it never happened.
Okay, so think about every single piece of text in a game. The character dialogue, the narration, the system text, the save text, all of the buttons, every single thing that is in English has to go through us to be edited. And usually there's not a lot of space. But organizing the text. Most companies will send us a whole bunch of Excel sheets all out of context, nothing, no pictures, nothing. And again, as I was saying earlier, we usually go off of an evaluation that's only a half hour to an hour into the game. So there's no context. It gets translated and then gets sent to an editor. So all out of context, and you're hoping that it's chronological, might not be chronological. Every company is different. And you edit the game, and you hope and pray that you have the context right. So the translator could be like, I looked over there at the shelf and picked up this item. And I would localize it and write it into a nice little sentence, and then suddenly we get the game, get the build, and you look at it and you're like, I see 6 shelves, and it's a cylinder, not a box, but I did not know that. So now I have to change it to, I looked over there at the shelves and picked up the cylinder. So you have to change those lines because in context it means something else.
Another thing to think about is that may sound like a simple fix, but a lot of text, especially in games, like text-heavy ones, because I've done a word count, are the equivalent of John Steinbeck's Red Pony. So you have to find a single sentence in an unorganized Excel file and the equivalent of an 800-page book and fix it.
Yeah, testers will QA and they'll be like, okay, this line says nothing to see here, but it shouldn't say that, it should be something else. And you look in the text file and you go, Control F, nothing to see here. Oh, there's 25 lines of this. Which instance is wrong? I have no idea. Tester, can you give me more information than nothing to see here? Some context would be helpful. So there's that, plus what else? Japanese does not use plurals or pronouns very often.
Yep.
So it could be like, I fell and broke my leg, or it could be, I fell and broke both my legs, but we have no idea out of context because one's singular and one's plural. It could be one person, 2 people, and then pronouns aren't used very often. So if it's out of context, you're kind of like, okay, is this a guy that I'm talking to? Is it a girl I'm talking to? Did he go to the store? Did she go to the store? I have no idea. You kind of have to go by context clues in the text and then pray that you are correct.
And sometimes when you get it wrong, like for example,
He has no experience in that.
No, I do because it was for Ragnarok Tactics. It was a PSP game that we did, and we were voicing it, had full dub. So I wrote one of the main characters. I thought I nailed the personality, nailed the way they spoke. I'm like, I'm gonna make her, like the character, I'm gonna make her a badass. She's just going to slay all that comes before her. Then I finally got to see the ROM, play through the game. I'm like, wow, he's pretty cute.
Whoops.
And I basically had, I think at the time, about 2 weeks to go through about 6,000 or 7,000 lines of text and replace all the pronouns, replace how they were referring to people. And there was literally no way to know, because if you look at the character art at the time, like the drawings, they were so ambiguous, and the person was wearing a helmet most of the time and armor. It was like, okay, I hope I'm right. And in this case, I was wrong,
Yes.
really wrong. And it
Okay,
also
'cause
made
we're
it
never
worse.
wrong again, Mike. It's fine. Like,
No, I think the other problem was we had also did all the voice casting for the characters. So having to also call the voice actress and go, excuse me, we won't be needing you, but thanks. That was kind of embarrassing as well, and I don't really have much of an excuse. I just thought it was a good story.
Yeah. Text for video games, we go by how many Japanese characters are in a game. So on the long end, otomes are all visual novels, so they're all text. those can range between 1 to maybe 2 million characters. So, and that doesn't always equate into English words because you could have one character and that could equal like 6 English words. So files are thousands and thousands and thousands of rows of text.
And hundreds of tabs.
Yes, lots of tabs. Google likes to crash, Excel likes to crash. You just save a lot and cross your fingers.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, another good fun thing is when the game isn't in chronological order, because for Tokyo Xanadu, for that game, I edited maybe the first third of the game, then the last third of the game, and then went back and then filled in the blanks in the middle. And even those were done by how you encounter certain characters when you play, not by like flow of the story. So at one point, I essentially memorized the game because I had to be able to refer to things like, oh, this character said this in this file, which becomes very, very important now that I'm in this file. So having a concordance helps a little bit, but it's not always possible, especially when you're on very, very tight deadlines.
Sound effects out of context are not the most fun. Japan very much likes their sound effects. But if you don't know what the scene is, I want to say a good example of our editor getting the sound effects wrong is one of the otomes. I think it was Norn 9, I believe. All the fans brought this up to us and were like, oh, because it was a kissing scene, but you only get sound effects. And like when they're written out in characters, you're not quite sure what the sound is. It's like a So you're like, okay, is it a grunt? What is it supposed to be? So I think the editor made them all grunts. So then they're like, mwah. So like, ugh. They're like, no, that's the wrong sound. No, have to fix that now. So it just
Better than
Japan
nom?
likes to just use but Japan likes to just use sounds kind of smushed together, and when they're translated, you're just like RCX. What? What is this supposed to mean? Is this a pained grunt? Like what is this supposed to be? So it's all out of context. That's what QA is like, our best friend. It's like, please tell us what context is wrong. But that's it. Most of the text.
I think
Speaking of the difficulties of translation, step 3 is start translating and also more editing. There's more editing involved at this stage as well.
yeah, dive in a little bit more into it because we were going very, very like just kind of like an overview. But once you're into the game, how it normally works, if we're lucky and the game has already been finished, because there's certain games that we get that have already been released in Japan, so the text is finalized, which makes life so much easier.
Yes.
How I would do it when I was editing more full-time was, since I can read Japanese, I would sit down and try to like just speed run the game. And while the translators were just kind of banging out text, I'd at least try to get a framework of like how things kind of work together. And then as we get translations, one of the first things I tried to do, and not always successful, is put together a glossary. For those budding localization editors out there, do this. Learn it and
Saves
love
you
it.
so much. And the thousands and thousands and thousands of rows. Could be on row 5 and be like, okay, this word is going to be this. And then it doesn't show up for like 2 months. And you get that word again, and you're like, I don't remember what I called this. If you don't have a glossary, someone later in QA will be like, is this supposed to be this? Yes, it's supposed to be that.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit, I kind of dropped the ball on a couple projects and had to like really work backward and reverse engineer some of my text. One of the games where it became incredibly important was Blaze Blue. For those familiar with the Blaze Blue story, it is convoluted to say the least. Also, as a side note, it has, at this point, last time I worked on it, it has twice as much text as Tokyo Xanadu, which is, of course, a Falcom RPG. Blaze Blue is a fighting game. Let that sink in. So a lot of times, if it's finished, it's just a matter of hoping that the files are in some kind of order that has some logic to it. It doesn't have to be good logic, it just has to be consistent. There are times when the files are just chaos. I worked on a PSP game, gosh, I'm dating myself, Fate Extra. I was the lead editor on that. All the files.
I helped you with that.
I'm so sorry. You managed to block it out.
God.
I haven't. I still wake up screaming. The files, none of them were named. It was all random numbers. Also, they were completely, like the order was random. So the very first file I worked on was the true ending. And another fun thing, within the files, they weren't chronological. How it would work is like a choose your own adventure story. So if you would like a conversation, then there would be a choice, A, B. If you chose A, then it would continue. Then it'd go to the next scene. Then 400 rows down, it's like, oh, here's what happens if you chose B. Mm-hmm. So you had to go back up, and the files would just bounce around. Every time you dove into one, it'd be a totally different part of the game. So that one was fun, I think, not only Karen, but also we had another editor. I don't know if she wants us to out her. No, but we had a wonderful person who helped a lot. I'm surprised she's still sane, but we persevered. But that's kind of the things we face. It gets more complicated if the game is not finished.
I have those stories.
Oh, we both would. Karen, you're up.
Oh yeah, quick sidebar, guys. Sorry, really fast. By the way, we're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of this, so if you do have any questions about the process, keep those in mind. We may throw things at you if you have a good question.
Not violently throw.
No, it's like a nice throw.
Okay, so unfinished games, Zero Escape series, Zero Time Dilemma was not done when we got it. It was still being written when we got it. So there was a lot of double checking with the creator on did you mean this? Is this correct? And all the visuals came after the text, and as we were working on our text, they were doing the voices on their end, so it was all concurrent at the same time. And if you played Zero Escape series, you know how many branching paths are in that game, and for all three games. And you have to keep them straight so that you don't accidentally spoil something that you don't learn in the current route. And so that was a lot of Zero Time Dilemma. I actually made a binder full of all the different points that I need to keep track of. We had a giant printed out the flow chart of the game and the file numbers, because again, the files were just numbered, and you have no idea what number goes to what, so you have to go by the flow chart. You'd be like, okay, this one follows this path. I have to find what was in that path. And they go, okay, I know this much information, and this is all I know, so I have to keep going on this route. So, and as it was still being worked on in Japan, so that affected a lot of stuff. And then dubbing it, that was another thing. That's separate. We're still talking about editing and text. But we also, the way that we work is we try to keep it to one translator and one editor per project if we can, because the more number of voices that are in a game, the more confusing all of the text and the characterizations get, because every translator translates differently. no one person writes exactly the same as somebody else. So the more voices you have working on a project, the more effort is required to make sure everybody sounds the same. That's why a glossary is very important, because everybody has to check it. So we try to keep it to just one person translating and one person editing, just so everybody knows there's only two people going back and forth, and the editor has the entire story in their head so they can keep all the characterization straight.
Yeah, because it gets to a point, like, I'm sure Karen has the same thing, where you get deep enough into a game where if someone asks you where any line of text is, like, I could tell you, like, okay, it's in this file, this tab, and it's between, like, within 3 or 4 rows. Because it's like, the idea is you do not want to have to go back and redo things. Because you've probably seen online, it's like, oh, you missed this spelling mistake. Oh, you used the twice. And it's like, for everything you guys see, we see probably 2 or 3 times as much and die inside every single time.
Yeah, every typo that gets pointed out to us, we're like, don't point out typos. We know they're in there.
Yeah, because a lot of times you have to understand that even with the QA process, at most you'll have maybe up to 10 people QAing a game. Then you turn it out into the wild. And I can't give exact numbers because I like my job and I don't want to get fired. You'll get, in the case of some of our titles, over 100,000 people, maybe more, all reading it simultaneously and burning through it. So that's like, who knows how many hours of manpower and eyeballs looking at it. Mm-hmm. So they're going to see things that we might have missed either through exhaustion or caffeine overload, because coffee becomes your friend and soulmate fairly deep into the editing process.
I have survived. No coffee for me.
What?
Huh?
I know, I don't drink coffee.
Hold on, I need to move my chair over a little bit. That frightens me.
I'm just on the marketing team, and I'm blowing through a Trenta of cold brew a day. What are you doing?
Hey, but I also work on all the death games, so I kind of get it all out through all of, like, I am the death game person. I'm not really sure how this happened, but I get all the games where everybody dies or there's ghosts. It gets really dark, and I've become immune to it because I'll have, like, the marketing team come up to me and they're like, this is a really gruesome scene. And I'm like, really? Oh, well, I'm glad I wrote it good.
And also,
thanks.
fun fact, her desk is separate from everyone in the back of the office, kind of in the dark.
Yeah.
I don't see a connection at all.
I have Zeroscape stuff on all my walls, so it's really not a happy space.
It's a melancholy place. I'm surprised you don't have black candles. One other thing, we're moving on. We might talk a little bit more about voice acting if people have any questions afterwards, is that another thing that kind of pops up, especially for those who want to get into the editing thing, is if you're doing a game when it's still being worked on, another fun thing that happens are character limits and how they change. Before Twitter changed over, when anybody asked me, like, what skill you need to be an editor, it was imagination, the ability to work under incredible pressure, and be really good at Twitter. Because essentially, if you look at games, it's conversations done 140 characters at a time or less. And I've worked on games where I've done the entire text, it's totally finished, and then they go, oh, by the way, the character limit isn't 28, like, English letters across, it's 26. And we're not giving you any more lines, so you can't just do line return. And we need the text in 2 weeks. Good luck. Yeah.
Character limits are
The bane of
they're the localization company's bane of existence, because a lot of Japanese can crunch all they want to say in 3 kanji, and so they're like, cool, this line can be 5 kanji long, and then you get it in English and you're like, well, I can say hello with an exclamation point. Woohoo!
showing emotion.
Like, yay! Luckily, we get usually Japanese when you translate it in space-wise with English, we get double the amount of characters that Japan does. And sometimes we push it even more because we'll be like, look at all of this text. Hey, there's this blank space. This is where the end is. My text stops here. I can keep going.
Please let us.
Please let us keep going. It would be really nice.
You would be surprised how much of a fight that is.
Sometimes they'll be like, only 2 rows, but the text box can fit 4. Can we write in 4 rows, please?
Please, sir, mass more.
Please? Be really,
Yeah,
be really nice.
It's like Oliver Swift time. Well,
Buttons, oh God. Buttons are usually like the worst part because they're like, this should say, switch to other character, but you only have the space for 5 characters. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm abbreviating here. It's got to fit on this button, and it has 1 Japanese character. Like, this does not work for English unless they have a microscope.
yeah.
To be fair, in some games you do have a microscope, so maybe we just put that in all of our games. This won't be a problem.
Yes.
Thoughts for the future.
Zoom in on buttons.
Fair enough. We're probably lingering on localization. That could be a panel in and of itself. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, so step 4, that would be the marketing process, which is where I start knowing things, which
Yay,
is so
you can talk
exciting for
now.
me.
We're going to stay quiet now. Go ahead, Bailey. You're up.
Okay, cool. Well, now I don't know where to start. See, I talked myself all up, and now I'm like, I don't know. Okay, so to start the marketing process, we sit down as a whole team, and we kind of discuss the direction we want to take the game in, basically, for like what audiences would be interested in the game. Who should we specifically be reaching out to make sure they see that this game is coming and that they can pre-order the game in a lot of cases. There's a lot of information that needs to get out there, so we work closely with our PR team as well to make sure that the right outlets, that the right people read, are reporting that the various steps of the game that are coming. And that can be really tricky, actually, a lot trickier than one might think. Some places just really don't want to tell people about your stuff, so you have to go to social media and you have to find creative ways to get people to know about these things, which is literally like the job. And part of the reason why we started the Twitch channel in the first place is to make sure everyone knows what games we're doing and what we have in our catalog. Mike, I missed stuff.
Huh?
That's not even a question. I missed stuff. Fill in the blanks for me.
Oh. Oh, sorry. No, I need caffeine. A lot of things, another thing that happens is a lot of the times the marketing process starts almost as soon as the ink is dry on the contract for the license.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of times, like, by the time you guys, like, the public hears about the game, unless it's horribly leaked, which luckily we don't have too many problems with that, we had been working on it and have building up to it for a few months. And one of the things that's also kind of challenging, especially if you have, for example, the Zero Escape series, where there's so much
Spoilers.
interest in it and spoilers.
Yeah.
Also, it's under a lot of attention. Like, for example, we were trying to do like this tease site. I don't even remember. I think it was for Virtue's Last Reward.
No, it was for Zero Time to Live.
It was for ZTD. We were trying to do like this, almost like I Love Bees thing. Like how Halo did that, where you start with this totally random website that doesn't really mean a whole lot, and it starts building towards something.
Again, there's like 4 people working on marketing total.
And unfortunately, someone found out about it, hacked all the metadata, and then the thing is, luckily, the person who was building the site,
Metadata was wrong.
the metadata was completely wrong. So we let it ride. So if you read stuff like NeoGAF back in the day and a few other gaming sites, the speculation and like just the fan theories just reached these epic proportions where they could have been a game in of themselves. But it worked out for us. But that's kind of the things that marketing has to deal with. You also have to balance. Of course, we want to sell games. We are a heartless, cruel, money-making entity that thrives, that want money hats for different days of the week. But you have to balance out with the fact that the game is fun. And we're also there for entertainment and also to build a community because we like our fans. we like our fans a lot, because if it weren't for you guys, there's no reason for us to exist.
We'd have no work.
We have no work and no purpose. Getting a little philosophical there. So that's kind of another thing, is like some companies do it better than others. Some, it's just always going out, and there's no way to interact with them. The balance with marketing and also kind of how community management, social media starts getting rolled into it, is trying to not so much preach to people, but create a dialogue. So that's kind of one of the things that you really have to balance, especially in enthusiast industries like ours, also mountain biking, anything where there's a passionate fan
The two
base.
things Mike knows most about.
And skateboarding.
I was gonna say that's a
And
a
craft
crossover
beer.
right there.
Okay, we'll stop about the beer talk.
Mike just spends the rest of the panel listing his interests. Sorry, we're
Someone
out of
will
time.
like me, please? Okay, we'll stop there. But it's kind of how things work, so moving on.
And,
Yeah, we gotta keep-
And marketing
it
also
moving.
includes, by the way, marketing includes all the box art, all the text on the boxes. If it's on Steam, there's always a description.
The website, the way the store
website
looks.
stuff. And that also, half of that usually goes through me also. So it's all text that has to get edited so that it correctly reflects what the game is about.
Yeah, because a lot of the time, the thing that's kind of difficult on the marketing team is we have to start planning how to market the game before we've had the chance to play the game, which can be really tricky sometimes.
Or they'll come and ask me and be like, is this an important
Yeah.
thing about the game? I'll be like, I have no idea. I've only been on this game for 2 weeks.
So it can be a little tough. You want to make sure you're providing people an accurate sense of what the game is, and you don't want to mislead people. And sometimes you're working with very little information in order to make that happen, which can be tricky. But we're perfect at it. Anyway, moving on. Step 5 is insert text/QA.
Oh, QA. QA is its own beast. We used to have in-house QA, which I was a part of way back in the day. And I started on 999 or somewhere around 999 time. Might have been Agarist War. That might have been.
No, it was August 4.
Was it? That was the first one. But in-house QA is very helpful because they can contact you really fast with a minor issue or a major issue, context-wise. And I think that's how I went up the ranks, is because I bugged the editors so much that they're like, maybe she could be a proofreader instead. Like, yay! I'm not on contract anymore. Woohoo! QA is like very important and needs to be stressed how important that is, because they're the ones that see the game when it's fully in context, has all the text. They can check to make sure there's no random Japanese lines, there's no buttons that are wrong, all the genders are correct, all the voices can be heard, and it's different than QA for Western games, like Bethesda games and all the games that come out in the US that aren't localized, because those games, the QA mostly focuses on functionality of the game to make sure that it doesn't crash, nothing's broken, no character falls through the floor. QA for localized games is almost entirely text-based, plus voices sometimes. And they have to make sure that all the text looks good, nothing runs outside the box, nothing overlaps, things like that. And it's important, the editor for each game usually has access to the database for all of the text bugs, and they all get fixed again on that giant Excel file. Like I was saying earlier, they need to give you context for some lines. Be like, hello, this doesn't have a exclamation point at the end. It just says hello and there's no punctuation. Well, could you give me the line before that and what scene this is in? Because hello comes up maybe 150 times in this text, and I don't know which hello this is. So it's very important I think QA, if anybody wants to get into QA, I think it's very important to be able to understand how English works. You read a lot of books and be able to understand that a sentence could be grammatically correct, but a lot of times we write so that it sounds natural. So how someone talks is not always grammatically correct. And sometimes we have QA houses that will be like, this has to be grammatically correct, every single sentence. You're like, no, that's like, can have slang in there. You can have weird words that we make up because that's how we talk normally. And so I think it's just a very important step. And I've seen, even because I'm in this industry, I've seen games like Final Fantasy even has typos in it still. So no game can escape the typo curse of there's always one.
Yes, they linger like the stench of a dead woodchuck. One last thing about QA before we move on.
Okay, we've got like 15 minutes or less, so
Yeah,
we have
so
one
we'll have
more
to go
step. So
real quick, and one more step, so we'll move on quickly. For those going into QA, just remember, if you're having fun, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, you play games all day, but you play the same thing over and over and over again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you can't, especially if you're looking at text, could be the 20th time you looked at this exact same text, but you have to make sure you actually read the text, because that's how we miss typos, because we read it and then your brain kind of goes, okay, it's gone. You're like in your head, this is what it was supposed to say. And I wrote it, but I wrote, instead of the, I wrote HTE. And you read it really fast, and you're like, okay, cool. That's the, this is the, it says the to me, and I read it. But QA could be like, no, that's a typo.
yeah,
They
it's
could
like-
also
yeah.
gloss over it because they read it the same way. They read it really fast.
Right.
You'd be like, that's spelled right, but it's still wrong.
Yeah, it's like you've sent an email before, I'm sure, with a typo in it at least one time in your life. I haven't because I'm perfect, but most people have. Imagine that your email is the length of an entire game. I feel like there would be more typos, so it takes a lot. We have to go through a lot, especially Karen. She gets really hooked up in there like Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network. It's really scary. And then there's one final step once we get through all of that, and that is master submission, which is apparently several booths at the con as well. Do you get it? Do you get it?
I missed it.
Aw, you told me about it.
Yeah, master submission, this is the one, this is the best and worst part of any project. It's the best because it means
You're done.
theoretically.
Yay.
It can be very stressful because the master submission process, this is where, going back to QA a little bit, is they're not only testing for just texts and stuff, but each platform like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo have their own regulations that your game must meet. There's certain things you must check off. And if they don't work in the way they want it to, they will send you back your game and go, you need to fix this, this, and this. Sometimes it's okay and it's like, all right, we just misplaced a decimal, big deal. Other times the developer will come back and go, yeah, that's gonna take 6 months to fix because it will crash the entire game if we take that line of code out. And then you start doing a lot of horse trading, and that's also where a lot of times where patches come in. But a lot of times for master submission, if it's something that will progress, like stop progression or the game doesn't function correctly, they give you a thumbs down and you have to go through the entire process again. That's why sometimes games get delayed. It's like, we're done, we finished everything. And then you give it to one of the first parties, and 5 seconds into the game, they go, oh yeah, we just blue screened it. Can you fix this for us? So yeah, master submission is very, very nerve-wracking.
That's also how sometimes typos still stay in the game, because if they're found too late, they can't be fixed. So QA goes right up into master submission usually. So the day before master submission, they could be like, here's 5 typos. like, I can't submit the text anymore. Those 5 typos will have to stay in the game.
Yes, and we do get near tears because it is a bummer, especially when you know they're there. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. And like what else? Each company has buttons, different, you have to capitalize things certain ways, you have to phrase things certain ways. That's also stuff the editor has to take care of. You write all of the button instructions, the control things, everything that comes up. Like on the DS, there's usually like the separate little, this is the control scheme for everything. All of that has to get written up. And even though I've been at this 10 years, I still don't have all of those different button names memorized. Some of them want capital B buttons. Some of them don't want capital B buttons. Some of them say directional keys. Some say directional pads. Some say directional buttons. Some say D-pad. Sometimes you're not allowed to say D-pad. It's like, somebody please double check this for me because I have no idea.
Yeah, it's chaos and insanity.
Right.
So with that being said,
I think that's what it all boils down to, huh?
yeah, I want to say we have a process, but we've just kind of talked ourselves into the fact that no, we just kind of run around with our head.
Every game is
chickens.
different. You learn something new, and you cry over something new for every game.
All right. On that note,
I know.
it's time to ask us stuff.
So if anybody has
So,
any questions?
Yeah,
oh.
we've got time for a few.
Okay, I think the purple,
Yeah.
the yellow collar? You were
Yes.
first, so. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Did everyone hear that, by the way? Or should we repeat? Nope. What advice do you have to get into game localization, and do you have to move to Los Angeles for it, basically?
Yes.
Cool.
The answer to the second one is it depends. If you want to do things freelance or contract, then it does not
Freelance
matter.
can be everywhere.
You can be anywhere and everywhere. If you want to work for a
Could
company,
be in Europe.
yeah. But if you want to work for a company, especially in our little circle of heaven, like the Japanese publishers, we're all concentrated either in the LA area or San Francisco. So moving would almost be a requirement. As for getting in, I always give this disclaimer whenever I give the following advice. It's not meant to be snarky. Apply. Because like anything else, if the job is available, apply for it. And then once you're in, just make sure that you have a body of work that people can look at. Make sure your resume has 0 mistakes. Because even at Aksys, because occasionally when we reach out to contract editors or people apply, we'll look at the resume. Especially for an edit, if there's a single mistake, it's like, nope. Because if you couldn't proofread your own resume, what are you gonna do to our games? But if you wanna be in a company, you'll probably have to make the move. If you just want to do freelance and just work on the games and more of like a contract or just have your own studio set up, you can work anywhere.
If she has networking abilities, like if she can reach out to other translators and other editors and make sure that they're all in the network, because a lot of times they will all post on social media that such and such a company is looking for an editor or a translator or something like that. So if she can make sure that she has some kind of network where she's in contact with other people, then that will also help her get into video games.
Okay, I think we have to move on. Did that help? Well, I've got a thing for you or your wife. I can't throw anything. Oh, God. I did really badly.
He could have gotten up. He was willing to get up.
We only have like 3 left in our entire warehouse.
Now
so
we have 2.
Now we have 2.
Okay,
JK. I have 2.
yeah, you've got the glasses? And, I probably should have did a disclaimer. We can't really talk about anything upcoming, for a number of reasons. We don't have time right now. If you want to hear them, I'll
It mostly boils down to we'll be fired.
yeah, exactly. So in lieu of answering that question, I will say a fun animal fact because of Fun Animal Park, which is that meerkats are the loan sharks of nature. So just be careful whenever they offer you
Oh my God,
anything.
I thought you were saying that they were solitary. I was like, no, I did all the research. They live in herds, Mike. But I get it now. I get it. Also, you get a jubei too. You ready?
There we go. Okay, we have.
Okay, that got,
All right,
got it further.
Last
Get
one.
reached
Last
over
one.
on, like,
Let's go
not-
there on this side.
mhm.
What
I
kind of
just-
projects need more than one translator?
Yeah, actually, Tokyo Xanadu was one. For
I
various
think
reasons.
Blaze Blue's some of the
Yeah,
places
Blaze Blue, we had 3 translators and 2 editors, like me, and we had another editor out of the company a while back. And Blaze Blue was easy to divvy up because the way the scripts work were by character. So we just divided the characters in half, and I did a set, he did a set. So we were able to keep all the conversations and personalization consistent, but while at the same time dividing and conquering. Xanadu, near the end we had 3 people working on it. It was me and 2 others. That's why sometimes there's kind of tonal shifts. The main editor who helped me a lot, Jessica Chavez, you've probably heard of her. She works for Exceed. She's known for her fashionable box heads and Love of Wine. She helped a lot. But if you have multiple editors, you have to have a lead editor. And I was the lead editor in that case, where you kind of like give a basic outline of like, here's the tone of each character, here's their personalities, here's some of the words and terminology that you must use in the game. That's where the glossary becomes very, very important, so that everybody, at least on the functional level, is on the same page. And then what I did is, as much time as I was able to, would be go back, read the other editor's work, and if it's far off, try to get it pulled into a single voice. But we try to avoid it because it's faster in some cases because you get more text done. But if everybody,
You have to backtrack sometimes.
you have to backtrack a lot, and also if you're not of a hive mind, it's a little bit extra work down the road where you have to start rewriting and retweaking things. Anybody else?
Oh, let me throw that jubei. He's
you
really testing me here. Okay.
Okay, you get the final
Right.
jubei.
Yeah.
This is the last.
Nope. You're about hit her in the
I
head.
probably should have been the one who threw them.
Thank you. I nailed it. I know.
Oh, no,
Good.
too far, too far.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go
We've only got 1 minute left. I don't think we have time. We also have no
Far
more
back.
jubeis. Fine. Okay.
far back with the blonde hair. Yes, the one pointing at herself.
Defiant.
Yeah.
We're working on.
Well, sometimes,
Redacted.
well, she's just asking how many normally we work on at a time. It depends on how many editors we got rolling at the same time. We had like 2 and assistant editor me at one point, so we had probably 2.5 to 3 because some of them can be at the beginning of the project and some can be at the tail end of the project. And then marketing is usually working on something that's already been completed. So probably at a time when we have a good stretch of games coming up, we'll have probably 5 in production at a time. Usually, now that we're down to just a couple people, 15 in the office, we usually have 1 being translated and edited, and then probably 2 in marketing because they'll be upcoming. It's usually about over a period of a year, there'll be some stage of something going on. So the game could be done text-wise, but still be working on with marketing. So we can only handle so many at a time. Proofreading, I could be like, yeah, totally give me 3 games at once. I can totally proofread these really fast. But then when you're editing, you're like, okay, I can only focus on this game. Then marketing will come over and be like, hey, can you give more information about this game that you just finished? So then you have to like deal with that one and then get back to your game.
Sorry, Karen.
I know, yes, thank you. Keep coming to me about games I've already finished.
I just don't want to be wrong. Okay, guys. So it's 6:31 now. I think that means our panel is over, right?
Yeah, we're
You can follow us on all the social media channels you see up there. We also, like I said, have a Twitch show every Tuesday and Thursday from 3:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So I guess that would be 12:30 to 2:30 Eastern Time for those who live out here. We also
The
have a
other way.
panel tomorrow
The other
in
way.
the main room 412.
Over here.
It's at 4 o'clock, and it is all about Otome, hot men, hot abs, hot mysteries.
huzzah.
So,
And
it should be fun.
yeah, just to close off, if anybody has any other questions, like afterwards, I'll hang out kind of out there if you want to ask something. If we can answer it, we will. If we can't, we won't. And if it's about upcoming titles, I'll just give you another fun animal fact. So thanks for coming out, and enjoy the rest of the
Thanks,
con.
everybody.
Hopefully see you Sunday.
Is that 4? I thought it was at 1.
It says 4.
Is it 4? All right, I guess. I just don't.